I'm Tabitha Scoble. I'm the assistant director here, and I have a few things to just talk about before we get started. We do have a raffle on the beautiful quilt by the door. Today we're going to be drawing for that. So if you would like a chance on that, be sure you see me or Mindy before you leave. We'll do it at the end. Also, we have a newsletter at everyone's place. Some of you are members, but we're asking if you could possibly take the extra newsletter and give it to a friend. That would help spread our good word out and about. Also, we have a book that we sign in and sign out of in the front of the room there. So if you didn't already sign the book, please do that. It helps us keep track of attendance. And you might notice the working calendars on your table. That's our latest effort, and if you are interested in purchasing one of those today, they're $15. And without further ado, this is Tammie Whitson, our speaker today. She's a co-owner of Cinch and a friend, and she's going to be talking about all stages of wool production, which should be very interesting. Thank you, Tammie.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm honored to be asked to do this. I like to talk about wool and how we got here. I'll give you a little bit of background on me. I'm originally from Susquehanna County, just south of Binghamton. I grew up down there, and that's my stomping grounds. I lived in New York City for 12 years, where I met my husband and dragged him back here with me. When it came time to think about a family, we wanted to move someplace that was equidistant to Ithaca, Syracuse, and Binghamton, near hospital centers and colleges and such, because he works in technology. And we chose Marathon. It took us about a year to find the farm that we live in. We weren't interested in having a huge amount of land. We did get a huge amount of land, but we wanted about 20 acres, and we ended up with 135 and a half. And so we're under farming that, I'll tell you that right now. But when we bought the place, we knew that we wanted an old house. We didn't know that we wanted a barn, but we got a barn. We got a barn that was built in 1900. One of those beautiful old buildings that we knew that if we ignored would soon fall down. And so we decided that we needed to put something in it. And we chose sheep because they're small and you don't have to milk them every day, unless you choose that type of sheep. So we chose the sheep. A beautiful small flock of Rambouillet. We started out with this registered flock. We had one ram who weighed about 300 pounds, so small is a relative term here, and 3 ewes that were unrelated. And that was the basis for our flock of sheep, which sometimes grew up to 30, but right now is down to 3. I have 3 old ewes with no ram anymore, because what's happened over the 20 years that we've been doing this is that my children, of which I have 5, 4 of them are represented here, but nobody's really been passionate about the sheep. And so for me it was, oh, you're going to be passionate about the sheep? I was kind of hoping that one of my kids, and maybe it'll still happen, there's time if you want to discuss getting a ram.
Every winter I have no choice.
That's my point, having no choice and being passionate about it is different. So, it's one of those trains that I don't really want to pull all the time. If one of the kids was willing to take it over for me, we would continue to have a ram on the property, and we, spring lambs are so much fun, although it's a misnomer, because lambs are actually born in January and February in order for them to be ready for Easter. So, a spring lamb means a January lamb, usually. It's cold in the barn in January, and the old farmers will tell you that in North America we have barns for the farmers, not for the animals. And while that's true, our sheep would do just fine out, with a little bit of shelter, or like a 1 or 2-sided shelter. It's a little bit nicer to have them in a barn, but it's still cold out there. It's still really, really cold. And the lambing, though, is one of the most fun things about having sheep. But it's also one of the most stressful things. We put a baby monitor in the barn so that I can hear the noises. You can kind of always tell there's a certain baa that a ewe will have when she's ready to have lambs. And You pull yourself out of bed and run down to the barn, and then you see, should I come back in an hour or should I just stay? You know, and it's like that for about 8 weeks, and it's a little stressful. And then trying to make sure they're warm. You know, generally everything is okay. It's hard to believe that this scrawny little skinny wet thing can come out in 30 below weather and within an hour be standing up, be dry, be eating, and you know, and then next day it's flopping all over the place, jumping, bouncing off its mother and everything. I mean, they're really wonderful. So our sheep started out all white because they were a registered flock, and over time we introduced some brown sheep. So over the years I've ended up with a kind of a rainbow of colors on our sheep. This is a good representation of the white. Now you see, this is called the staple length. And it's generally how much wool a sheep will grow in a year. So this was where she was sheared last year, and this was where she was sheared this year. So this is the cut end, and this is the growth end. This is the end that's exposed to all the elements and everything. This is the end that gets really dirty, I'll be honest with you. The wool that I brought in today has been cleaned, in that all I did was wash it. I wash it in Dawn, and I'll go through the process with you. All I did was take out the smell of the barn here and some of the grease, but you'll still see chunks of hay and debris and other things in here. So as you know, when I pass these things around, touch if you want. You don't, you know, don't feel like you have to, but they have been cleaned. You know, as far as that goes. So that is the first step. Well, the first step is actually the shearing. And people always ask me, do you shear your own sheep? And the answer is absolutely not, because that's a young man's job. That's not an old lady's job. So I get the guy. I have a guy that comes from Cornell, and he always says the same thing when he shows up. He says, don't you have anything smaller? Because the Rambouillet tend to be kind of big sheep. They're a great breed. They descended from the Merino sheep, the Merino flocks in Spain, and those were a really closely guarded sheep. In fact, it was a penalty of death if somebody were to try and smuggle a ewe out of Spain back in the 1500s. The cornerstone of their economy was the textile and the wool that came from these Merino sheep. There was I'm gonna try to remember the date. It was in the 1700s. I'm afraid 1730s. I'm thinking. There was a marriage between the family, the monarchy of Spain and the monarchy of France, and part of the agreement was 200 ewes and 40 rams were given to France from Spain. This was a huge deal. A very huge deal. Those sheep went to the Rambouillet Ranch, Rambouillet Farm in France, and what was developed there became the Rambouillet breed. And they're a lot like a Merino, so it's very, very soft. The wool that you get from these animals is wear next to your skin soft. I mean, you can knit your underwear out of these, honestly. They're so, so soft. With the Rambouillet, one of the things that they breeded out of the animal were the folds, skin folds. And it was, I mean, over centuries of breeding them in Spain, what they had done was to breed extra skin into these animals. So think of a Shar-Pei dog that has all the extra folds. The sheep are like that under their wool to increase the surface area so you can increase the yield that you get in wool. They're a bear to shear though, and anybody will tell you they don't like to shear Merino because of the folds. It's very easy to nick. It's hard to make it come out nice because you're shearing through mountains of skin folds. So they bred that out with the Rambouillet. They're a much more solid skin animal. They're also a great dual purpose sheep. So by that I mean they're great to eat. They grow to a fine carcass. It took us 15 years before we actually ate one of our sheep. You know, when they're practically pets, and I just didn't have any desire to. At one point, the opportunity presented itself where I have a butcher in the family, and he said, well, you've got these 7 lambs, why don't we do it as a co-op for the family? And he agreed to do the slaughtering and butchering, and everybody, you know, took home meat. And I kind of got addicted to the lamb then. So if for no other reason than to have it in the freezer, I might just get a ram so that we have a few lambs every year at this point. As far as the wool goes, I have enough wool to last me a lifetime. I do sell it right off the sheep's back on the internet to other people who spin. They'll buy a whole fleece from me. My sheep throw 15, 20, sometimes 25 pounds of wool, which is enough to keep an eager spinner busy for over a year. So, you know, one fleece lasts a long time. But I process whatever I can myself. And I use a variety of tools, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. I'm going to pass this around. I'll start with you guys. Dasha, if you want to like pass that around, see if anybody wants to play with that or hold that. There you go. And that one can go the other direction. That's, like I told you, that's the wool just washed. So it's got the smell of the barn taken out of it, but nothing else has happened to it there. In fact, it's not even particularly clean. Once I go through some of the carding processes, a lot of dust and debris will fall off of it. And I'm going to apologize to Tabitha. I'm going to have to clean up afterward because this is really dirty work. And all I do is set my stuff down, and there's like, you know, chaff all over the table and everything already. There's no way to get around it. My preferred way of processing wool is with Dawn dishwashing liquid in a big stock pot. I bring the stock pot up to about boiling, almost, well, yeah, boiling, but you don't want to boil the wool itself. I'll put it into a bag that I've got here. Like, this is kind of a smallish one, but think like an onion bag or a lingerie bag. Stuff as much of as you can into that. Thank you very much. And then just put it into the hot water with the Dawn, and it will, it breaks up the grease. Leave it in there for 15 or 20 minutes, just let it do its thing. When I lift it up, the water is black. It's just amazing how much dirt will come out of that little bit. Dirt, grease, stuff from the bottom of the barn, everything comes right out. Now, the reason why I don't go in there and rub it around is because that's how you make felt. And felt is great. It's when the fibers lock. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but you don't want to do it at that point in the washing. You want to be very steady and gentle with the wool. Don't rough it up too much, and don't temperature shock it. So I pull it out of that stock pot. The stock pot is filthy and stinks. You dump that, right?
Yep.
And then you have more hot water ready for your first rinse. I give it about 3 rinses, and with a final rinse with some vinegar in there, just plain old white distilled vinegar to condition it. And that's the point that I might add color as well if I were to dye my wool. Now here's some wool that I've added. This has red and green in it. This was white wool. You can over dye on brown wool as well and get some really beautiful colors. Dyeing wool would take me a half hour to talk about that on its own. So I'll just let you know you can add colors. The sheep don't look like this in the field. This one's made out of right? So the question is, how does it go from, you know, those pieces that you're passing around to where it looks like this? It's a nice long rope. You could actually knit with this right here, and people do. Use roving to knit with, and you get these really beautiful big hats and rugs and purses and things that you felt and all. That's the next point in the process. So that wool that has been going around, these are the locks, this is the staple. You have a lot of options at this point. Depends upon what you want your final product to look like. I tend with this type of wool, because it's so fine and, you know, soft and wear next to your skin, I choose combing. These are the combs that I use, and they're really dangerous, nasty things. They're all these spikes that stick up, and the the tips are really more like needles, less like nails. So this is something I always keep the covers on. They're not to be treated without a fair amount of respect. I'm going to show you the combing in just a little while, just so you know that's my preferred way of processing. What's more common is carding. And there are a whole bunches of ways that you can card. These are hand cards that are, you'll see these throughout the industry and people at craft shows and things like that using these. And with these, all you're doing is loading the wool on here, and you're getting it to make a web. Here, your objective is not to get all the fiber going parallel. Your objective is to make it more of a web, and you end up with sort of a row log over time. I'm not going to do the whole thing for you here, but you'll end up with a row log that you can then spin, put into your spinning wheel and spin. And in fact, if you watch me go like this and pull these fibers out, I'm making yarn right there in front of you. Originally, that was the way people would spin thread 10,000 years ago. It could be as simple as a rock, you know, on a stick. Here's a technological advancement from this. It's a drop spindle, and with this, you put the twist into the yarn with a whorl like this, and the twist will move up into here, and you end up with your thread. And then people who do this can get really, really fast. I'm not one of them. I tend to like my wheel, which I'll show you later. But then after you've spun the thread, you need a place to put it. You store it on this spindle at the bottom, and then loop it back on and keep going. It seems really time consuming, but I've seen drop spindlers could outspin me on my spinning wheel. They're so fast with this tool. Now, like I said, this is a really ancient, it seems like a new technology. It's an ancient technology. 150 years ago, nobody would have to ask what this is because it was ubiquitous like a fork. Everybody would have had one. Little kids, this is how they would spend their downtime, would be spinning. Nobody didn't know how to use one of these. Little boys learned, little girls learned, everybody learned how to spin. It was the way you made thread up until 150 years ago. You wouldn't have any sails, you wouldn't have any blankets, you wouldn't have any clothes, you wouldn't have anything unless everybody was doing this, right? So the hand cards, like I said, you'll find these everywhere. I have kind of a cross between what you might find in a factory and what you'll find in a home mill. This is a drum carder. So this does the same thing that these hand cards do, but a lot of it is mechanized. This is another kind of a dangerous machine, and I will tell people if you wanted to come up here and try it out, you can, but read the sign and pay attention to it. It says use caution, keep your hands clear, because these are really sharp. But the wool just fits onto the tray. It'll get picked up all by itself and go through here where then it gets filled up onto the large drum. You like that, huh? Yeah. The kids act like they've never seen this before.
I never knew what it was.
And then after you fill this whole drum up, you can step back please so other people can see. There's a spot here where there are no teeth, and that's where you break it apart. You don't want to cut it because you never want to cut the fibers. You always want to break them apart like that, and then you can pull it off. Now once this drum is full, I would end up with a large rectangular pillow of wool that you can then felt, you can spin, you can knit it right from there if you want, you know. But this is the drum carder. But as promised, I'm going to go right on to my favorite tool. I'm going to go over and take a seat, right, bud? This is my Nikolai, by the way. I have, like I said, I have 5 children. There's Nikolai, Christina, Dasha, and Yale. We have one more, but he's in college right now, so he's not with us today. Now these are the combs. This process of combing wool was the very last thing to be mechanized during the Industrial Revolution. Carding was mechanized, spinning was mechanized, weaving was mechanized. Everything about the process had gone over to factory work, except for this. The guild, the combing guilds were really strong. They had a reputation for being raucous and hard drinking. They were the ones that, you know, you didn't mess with the combing guild. Let's put it that way. It was all men, you know, and you just didn't mess with them. You can kind of see why when you go through this process. Now, I'm not in a great position to be doing this, but this is called lashing on. And now remember I said that these nails have tips like needles, and I've bled plenty of times. I keep my Band-Aids close by when I'm doing this type of thing. But with this, I'm just going to fill this up probably about halfway. And all I'm doing here is just fixing that wool onto here, onto the first comb. And then I turn it. I love these combs. They're so nice. These cost me about $125, probably 15 years ago. And they've seen a lot of wear, but I would buy them again. You know, what a great tool. So, pardon me, I'm going to move around here so you guys can see what I'm doing, but it's, I got another comb. This is my stationary one. This is the one I'm moving. It doesn't matter which one I use. I could have put this one in here and used the other one, but now I'm going to go through and start to grab a hold, and I'm transferring the wool from one comb to the other. And Tabitha, again, I'm going to apologize because there's going to be a lot of debris around underneath this. The nice thing about this and why it's my preferred method is because when I'm done, the wool that I walk away with is going to be extremely clean. There won't be any debris or noils, little what they call second cuts when the shearer goes through and accidentally gets a little shorty short in there. Those end up as pills in your work, and you don't really want that. This gets rid of all of those. So I took it all, put it onto here, and now I'm going to put it back on. And the process here could go on as many times as I wanted to until I had blended my colors as much as I wanted to, and also made my wool as clean and fine as I wanted to. Now the difference between what I'm doing here and what I do when I card is that I'm making a parallel product here. All the fibers are going pretty much in the same direction, whereas when you card, you're getting a web where things are sort of straight, but they're all going in different directions as well. Now I'll stop there, although I probably wouldn't if I was doing this for a true project. The next step is, how do I get this off the comb? And you use a little tool called a diz. It's just something concave with a hole in it. This one's ceramic, but the one that I usually use is this one. It's just PVC pipe with the hole cut in it, and it makes a fine diz. You take all the wool, bring it down to a cone at the front, and twist it some so that you can fit it through the hole. And like threading the needle, right? Good. And then you start to pull, and it yields you this absolutely gorgeous rope of completely processed wool. And I mean, for the time that I just put into this, it's not a whole lot of time to get this. I mean, if I spend an afternoon with this clamped onto my porch railing, I can bang out a pound of wool, and that's pretty nice. That's a sweater, you know? So I'll stop there, and I'm going to send that around for people to touch. You know, we just went from that nasty, gnarly wool to something that's just absolutely gorgeous. The color is nicely blended. It's soft. I mean, there may be one little piece of debris on there, but for the most part, it's really, really clean. And that's the combing. Like I said, that is my preferred method. That's how I get these ropes that I can then spin. Either on a drop spindle or on, again, I go for the newfangled technology, the spinning wheel. And I'll show you the wheel because, is it okay if I put it on this table? Sure. Would that be all right? It'll give everybody a chance to see it then. I'm fascinated by the technology here because it really hasn't changed much in 200 years. It's essentially this. It's the drop spindle put on its side with the wheel to make it spin up here. The only thing that's changed about the spinning wheel from the colonial days is this flyer attachment, which is just an amazing piece of technology because what it does is allow the spinner to sit down while they work. Back in the old days, you'd have a great wheel, one of those gigantic wheels. You'd spin, you'd turn the wheel and you'd draft out and spin just like I showed you on the drop spindle. You get out far enough, you have to walk back and wind it on. There was no mechanism to automatically wind it onto a bobbin. So then you'd spin it again, you'd walk away, you'd come back, spin it on. And that's why they called it the walking wheel. This flyer wheel attachment up here automatically puts your work onto this bobbin. So that meant that women could then sit down and work, and that would revolutionize the way people worked. Of course, it was only 30-some years before everything went to the factories after that, so it didn't revolutionize it for very long, but we're left with this really great piece of technology, which I got to tell you, I'm not sure a whole lot of people would spin if we still had to do the walking wheel. They're fun to look at, but they're a real pain, to keep on. You get your steps in, I guess, but I would encourage anybody who would want to give spinning a try to come on up and try it. We can put a chair up here and I can walk you through the process. It is essentially the same thing that I showed you on this. You're taking the wool. The spinning is actually happening between your hands. We all like to think it's the wheel that's doing it, but all the wheel is doing is putting the twist into the fiber. So if I get that going, you can see. Oops, going the wrong way? I was going the wrong way. So all that's doing is putting the twist into the fiber, and it kinks it up so much that you end up with a double ply when you put it back on itself. That's how you get double ply wool. You just spin it back on itself. The twist dissolves and you end up with two pieces of wool, two pieces of thread like that. So there was one other thing that I wanted to show you today, and those were the different types. Well, a couple things actually that I wanted to show you. I picked these out of the yard today, teasels. Yeah. What do you know about them?
They actually used them.
Yes.
The factories.
Exactly. Skinny Atlas was the teasel capital of the world, evidently. I mean, I go to the Dickens Festival with the family, and they always give out at the end of the festival. They give out something called the golden or the silver teasel, and if you've never been to the Dickens Festival up in Skinny Atlas, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. But that's the teasel was used to. Thank you very much. The teasel was used in wool production. It brought up the nap. It was used for felting and fulling. So once you get your nice piece of wool like this, you have to do something with it. I mean, you could stuff a mattress with it at this point, but you have to make it into something else. These were imported from Europe. They're naturalized now. We consider them weeds. They're everywhere. They're really hard to eradicate. But they were brought here because they were fit into these machines. They were much more gentle on the wool than any metal and they didn't have to be replaced as often. When they were replaced, they were really cheap to replace because you just go out in the fields, and I mean, people were actually cultivating them, so they were farming the teasels. But this was, for a good 50 years, it was a major part of the economy in Skaneateles, teasel production. So the other thing I wanted to show you was the different types of fiber. Now, obviously, we have sheep, and so it's cheap to free for me. But once you get into a craft like this, it's hard not to build up a stash. So I have a lot of other types of fiber here that I'm going to encourage people to feel and stick your fingers into. This is mohair goat. I'll ask you to pass that around. This is alpaca. I'll ask you to pass that one around. Thank you. You'll see a lot of alpaca farms around right now. Alpacas are camels, camelids. This is true camel here, so you can feel this really, really soft. I have some bunny. This is Angora rabbit. And do you know what this is?
Silk. The silk.
It is. It's the silkworm, right? You can pass those around. There is a silkworm in it, and this is silk that's in here. There's also, this is some silk that I spun short. Camel hair coat, isn't that something? Silkworm in there. And last but not least, I have dog hair. If you have sheep, you have to have a sheepdog. We have a, I'm going to ask you to stand there. We have a Great Pyrenees. They're the big white, they look like a German Shepherd, but they're all white. And they attach to their flock and spend all their time with the sheep. Now, of course, our dog attached to the children and spends all of her time on the porch with us, but she won't come into the house, but she still considers us her flock. But everybody always says, why don't you spin your dog's hair? And so I did. And the white stuff in this is Adele's dog hair. I mixed it in with some brown sheep wool to make a yarn. No. And then I did actually, I actually made a scarf out of it, but then the dog hair leaks out and gets on stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, I spend all my time trying to keep dog hair off of me. Why would I wear something made out of dog hair? So it was a fun experiment, but I don't recommend making things out of dog hair because you'll wear it all the time. Now, one other thing that I didn't mention, but that I should, is needle felting. Now, I'll preface this by saying that, you know, my shop is Cinch Art Space over in the Corset building. If you haven't had a chance to visit over there, please do. We have the works of 60 local artists in there. So it's also a really nice time to visit because we are loaded for bear for Christmas right now. All the artists are bringing in. So we have 4 potters, 4 woodworkers, 7 jewelers, fiber artists, people who make bags. We got all sorts of things there. So I've got these cards here for anybody who's interested in visiting Cinch. One of the things that we do besides sell the work of local artists is we also do skill sharing classes. And one of the classes that I offer there pretty regularly is needle felting. And that's where you use these little tiny needles that used to, well, they're made actually to fit into a machine where you'll have a blanket of these needles that pound into a huge swath of wool to make felt, natural felt. That's how felt is made. What people realized about 20 years ago was that you can take the individual needles out of that machine and you can use them to make artistic things. So Yeah, it's just amazing. Again, you need Band-Aids here. These are very, very sharp. You will bleed. But I do classes on needle felting, very simple needle felting. You can do flat landscape felting. You can do three-dimensional dolls and animals, masks, all sorts of great things. I mean, really, the sky is the limit when you start with needle felting. So I recommend that you check out Cinch Art Space. If you go to our website, you'll see a calendar of different classes that are available. Once the Christmas holidays are over, I'll start offering some more wool skill sharing. So we'll be doing a series where we start with raw wool and take it all the way up to something that you can wear. So we spend 1 week on washing and dyeing, the next week on carding and processing, the third week on spinning, the fourth week on knitting and crocheting. So you can actually, you know, over time, go from sheep to shawl on something like that. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
The census had an agricultural census with it added onto the population census
Yes.
for, say, 1850 or 60 or 70. And they had the number of yards of full cloth. I heard you use the term.
Yep.
What did, if they had produced 200 yards of full cloth, what would we be looking at?
Well, it would be probably, I wouldn't know the width on something like that because it was all mechanized. Like if I did 200 yards of full cloth, it would be 200 yards at this width. My expectation, though, in manufacturing is that it would be more like this.
And these were each farmer, on each farm.
On each farm?
So they would, you know.
Would that be like the width of a loom for a jacquard loom?
It would be. That would be loom size, then I would say. Well, no, that's not really true. It would probably be something more this size because this is what you would expect to see at a home mill, a farm mill. Something like this. I mean, there are certainly larger machines that you'll find at wool mills, but I don't know the answer to whether or not they would have had a farm-size mill. Those are pretty rare. There's one in Genoa. There's a woolen mill up there, and they have, theirs is from here to the end of the wall, so their 200 yards would be that wide. It's a lot of fold fabric, yeah.
What does fold mean?
Fold just means felting. So it's when you take the wool at this point, it's nice and everything's in a straight line, the fibers are all behaving. You can do it a couple of different ways. You can do it with needles by digging the needles in, and it pulls, each one of these needles has a barb, and so it pulls the wool back up. And think dreadlocks and hair. That's kind of what's happening. It's locking, the fibers are locking. Same thing as when you put a sweater in the washing machine, a wool sweater in the washing machine. That's what's happening there. Through agitation and temperature shock, the fibers lock up together, and that's why it's so tiny too when it comes out, is because it's just gotten really stretchy. So you can do the same thing with wool like this. You lay it out flat. I'll do it on my dish drainer. Cover my dish drainer with wool, pour boiling water over it, and put on my rubber gloves and just start going like this. And then I'll douse it with cold water after a couple of minutes, and then I'll douse it again with hot water after a couple of minutes. And it takes 15-20 minutes, but I'll end up with the size of my dish drainer, a piece of felt that I can then cut into baby booties or, you know, make whatever you want with it. So fold fiber is fiber that's gone through some process like that. Oftentimes it has more to do with this type of action though, you know, closer to what we do with the needles than what we do with wet felting. So you would have something like this, and in this case actually this, and just keep on going like this. That's what the machine would have done for you.
So the machine would hold the teasel, you'd have a bunch of teasels and
the teasel actually, or the machine accepted these, and then when they wore out, you'd replace them with another one, and it just would bum, 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 until this shrunk into a mass that would become a part. Think like a mat, like a felt mat. I'm sorry, yes?
It's an unsolicited advertisement. If people haven't gone down to Cinch, you need to go down there. It's the neatest place in Cortland.
Thank you.
Lotions and potions and jewelry and artwork. And it's nice to support local people. So please go down there. It's in the Corset building. So.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is a shop like we don't have in Cortland.
Yes.
As far as that goes, it's, you know, and that's one of the reasons why we opened it, was because we are producers and we didn't have any place like that in Cortland. We don't want to go to Skaneateles and Ithaca. We want it here.
Well, your building being historical to begin with is not unlike the fact that the Newton woolen mill stood on Route 281 in the corner of 41. The Teasels were up the road.
No kidding.
You had Tabitha. Ask Tabitha.
She has a membership now. So.
And Mr. Randall of Cortland, if I'm not mistaken, his breed of sheep were merinos that he took from the other end of Main Street and his land, the house is still there, his land is there, and put them on the Erie Canal to the Hudson River, to New York City, to boats to South America.
Oh my goodness.
His merino sheep.
No, on the hoof.
On the hook.
Yeah. Wow.
So there's a whole lot of reading for you.
Anybody else have any questions or?
We had a question
Yes.
about the rabbit.
Yes.
There. Is that, do they brush it off the
Yes,
animal?
they brush it off. There is a terminal haircut that you'll get on sheep, and that's the haircut where, as my son likes to say, you use every part of the buffalo, right? So we take the skins after slaughter, and there's a place in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. It's pretty famous in the Northeast where they will tan your hides, and boy, they come back. It's like opening a Christmas present. I have to tell you, the first time I sent sheepskins down there, it was embarrassing because they are gory. They are, I mean, they're salted, they're cured, but they are gory. They're just disgusting. And they say, put it in a box and put it in the mail. And I was like, really? I went to the post office with this box, like expecting it to be dripping. It was just so bad. Here, and sure enough, they delivered it down there. When it came back, snowy white, gorgeous sheepskins came back out of the box. There are places where you can get sheepskins. It used to be Cinch. I don't have any there right now. But I don't know if you know of the Northland Sheep Dairy. They're my neighbors in Marathon, Freetown, actually. And they have been, 40 years now, they've been making sheep milk cheese here. They used to sell it at the Ithaca Farmers Market. They're now selling it right here locally in town. You can get it at the local food market. They're farming in such a wonderful way. All ground driven. They use all mules and ground driven animals. They just last week put up a barn with the help of our Amish neighbors, and they had an old fashioned barn raising over there. But they, where was I going with this? There was something I wanted to say.
Sheepskins.
Sheepskins, thank you very much. You can always contact Northland Sheep Dairy. She's always got sheepskins, and I highly recommend them. They are like a warm hug in the winter and cool in the summer. They're just excellent things. And they last your lifetime. You give one to a kid and they take it to college with them, 20 years from now. So yeah, it's nice. Yes.
You were talking about processing in Genoa.
Yes.
Is that on Indian Field Road by any chance?
I don't think it used to be.
I saw
They
sheep.
do. It used to be called the Woolery. And it's not anymore. They've changed ownership. The Woolery is now in North Carolina, and I'm sorry to say I still order from them even though they're not local. But they sell tools and things like that, so you can always order from the Woolery. And they used to be right up there in Genoa. I don't think that's the name of the road, but I couldn't tell you offhand what the road is. I could get you there. I could drive there, but I couldn't tell you the road. You know how that is? You're like, oh, turn here. So it's right off of that,
Off of 90,
yeah, right off 90. You make a right
at the top of the hill.
at the top of the hill.
That's Indian Hill
That's
Road.
probably it, okay.
There's a bunch of sheep up there.
Yeah, off at they're actually at the end of the road. The road may continue, but it's like it's a dirt road after that. And they've got a big barn and a big mill in the barn. No?
No.
Okay, that's a different place then.
paved all.
Okay.
I have to investigate.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a few places where you can send raw wool and they will send you back wool at any point in the process. They'll spin it for you. They'll even knit it into socks for you because they have it, it's all mechanized now, of course, right? But what I like to do is to wash the wool first. So I'll take a fleece, go through that process of washing until the whole fleece is washed. Then it's cheaper to ship because it doesn't have all the grease. It loses almost half its weight in grease. So, a 20-pound fleece becomes a 10-pound package that goes in the mail.
With all the washing that you're doing to the wool, I guess I'm thinking of a fisherman's knit sweater from Ireland. I have one I wear in the wintertime.
Yeah.
I'm out in the snow, and when it's a wet snow, I can still shovel.
Yeah.
And I'm not wet because it's shedding the
Yeah.
water as they wore them out on fishing vessels.
Exactly.
So if you keep washing and washing, it doesn't matter what, you still have some oil in it.
You can get to the point where there's no oil. In fact, it's a point of contention with a lot of spinners because if your wool is overwashed, you end up having to put oil back into it. This piece of wool, I don't know if you touched this when it came around. It's been washed. It's had the one washing. But you can still feel the lanolin on it. At this point, this is when somebody in Scotland or Ireland would have spun it and made a sweater out of it. And you'd never wash that thing because you've got the protection of the sheep on you then. Wool itself will give up water. It doesn't, it wicks the moisture away from you, so it's very cool in the summer, very warm in the winter. It's a great insulator. But having the added lanolin, there's no point in taking it out if you're just going to add it in later. So this, right here, this is the point when you'd make an Irish sweater. Yeah.
Do you harvest the lanolin at all?
I don't. I've never really looked into how it's done. I know that it's a distilling process, and then you're always fighting with bacteria and molds, and so I've never done that. And I don't use lanolin in any of my products that I make, so it just hasn't come up.
It wouldn't just rise to the top when the water got cold.
Well, that's it. It would, but then there's like this careful process of cotton balling off the oil, and then and it can be done. I know that's how it's done in like a home operation. They do it with cotton balls or with a flat piece of felt, they put over to catch all the oil, and then. But I've never done it myself. No. It's like tallow, I make soap and people are always saying, have you ever rendered your own tallow? And I was like, I did it once, but I'm never ever going to do that again. I can go to Maine's, which is a local store, and get 50 pounds of tallow that's clean. It smells like Crisco, I'm not going to render my own things.
She mean Maine.
But it just goes to show that say 200 years ago plus,
Yes.
for eons, the amount of work that usually the women
Yep.
and some of the men and
Absolutely.
the children, what they had to do just to clothe themselves and to stay warm.
Indeed.
And yet so creative that they would develop that technique to protect themselves. I mean, it's amazing.
What's amazing to me is that it ever became an art form. When you think about, at what point did this, like I've got a garment that I'm going to wear, now I'm going to make it pretty, Now I'm going to make it prettier than my neighbors or whatever, That to me is just so amazing.
Yes.
And how craftsmanship developed, spinning really fine thread for embroidery and all. And it was all done like this. You look at those tapestries, it was all done like this. Is it human
Just to
nature?
be better than everybody else.
It could be.
So early on, a linsey woolsey blanket was a combination of making very fine thread from your sheep, and the same with the linen.
With flax,
And the warp,
right?
and then wrapped and making a sheet with it.
Yeah. Do you weave?
No. I don't.
Oh, okay. Because you know a lot about weaving. Weaving is one of those things that I've always wanted to try, but I've never. I always say I don't have the floor space for. But really, what it is I just can't take on another thing.
Well,
Right?
there was a group in the area that was called Seven Valley Weavers. I don't know if anybody here knows people.
Yes, I was a member.
Oh, were you really? Yeah.
Yes, and it's amazing because I was much younger then, but we would get together in Homer, and in fact, one of the churches, and we had these rooms, and we had all kinds of sizes, from the tree for the children, and then, you know, the back strap for the women, and then you had these huge, and I had the barn strap. But anyways, I'm sitting there weaving away, doing all this stuff, and I'm thinking, why am I getting so hungry? We started about 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. It was like 5 in the afternoon, and I was so enwrapped, you know, just doing all of this, that I was just completely oblivious to everything else.
Isn't that
And I
amazing?
didn't have any stress, I didn't have any gray hairs, I didn't have anything. I was just entirely right there, you know, it was amazing. And we were developing, using puffs of the wool to make the creativity, you know, like including like the macrame, and then you'd weave, and then you'd push these other things
Toss them in, yeah.
Yeah, do all these other, and so I do have some of those wall hangings.
Wow.
But it was so much fun, but a lot of it came from the Native Americans when they were trying to be developing and use the seashells and different things that they would find. So it was, to me, I just am amazed how they all came together, and that was just kind of a little bitty bitty piece of what they did for years.
Yeah.
So there's no more weaving guild?
I don't know anything about anything now. In Homer, the lady passed away that was pretty much in charge of it all.
There is a
So-
guild, it's called Black Sheep Spinners Guild, that they
Yes,
meet in
I have
Lansing,
heard of that.
and it's a wonderful
Lansing,
group.
Ithaca.
Yeah.
Yep, it's not just spinning, you'll find all different types of fiber arts there.
Yeah.
And I was a member of the guild for a few years before I had so many children, and that's when I had time. And they're just wonderful, because when I bought my first wheel, I didn't know anything about spinning. All I knew was that I wanted to try it, and they were great. You know, helped me set it up, get the tension right. It's one of those crafts where the learning curve is really, really steep in the beginning, but then once you get over it, it's just, you know, your creativity can just fly. It's fun.
Some of the ladies here may have remembered Kathy Hauk. She was an art teacher, and she was one of my mentors, and we would go to her house, and she had the looms up until the day she passed away. And we would, and she just like stair runners, and I mean, just the most amazing pieces. And we had a lady in our church from Dog Hollow in Kyler, and I can't think of their names.
Right. His name was
But
Billy.
she would also bring in the
Listen.
wool, and so it was a nice community.
That's great.
Being able to have that background and knowledge, and unfortunately, like many things, there's just kind of very few people like yourself continue doing that. And it's important to let our children know, because if those satellites get blown up, and we have more technology, and we have to go back to the land, we will survive, right?
I always say, as long as I can find a couple pointy sticks, we'll have something to wear.
Thank you very much.